What if the fairy tale love story we were sold was already fractured from the inside, and the cracks finally burst open for the world to see? That's the question on everyone's lips when whispers of Meghan Markle publicly rejecting Prince Harry collided with reports of her secretly flirting with another man. A bold claim, yes, but the tension in their body language, the chilling silences in their interactions, and the storm of speculation that followed painted a picture too striking to ignore. Was this the moment that proved love wasn't enough to hold them together? Or was it all part of Meghan's grander, hidden strategy? You see, introductions are everything. Think back to when Meghan first entered the royal fold. The world was enchanted, Harry was radiant, and for a fleeting moment, it seemed as though the monarchy had found its modern-day fairy tale. Yet here we are, years later, talking not about unity, but about rejection, a public one at that. And rejection cuts deep, especially when it's delivered not behind closed doors, but beneath the relentless glare of cameras and flashing lights. Isn't it strange how love stories often unravel not in whispers, but in grand, unforgettable spectacles? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Picture it, Harry standing there, eager, reaching out, maybe with a look, maybe with a gesture, only to be met with a cold response from Meghan. Not anger, not even overt hostility, but a dismissal so sharp, so calculated, that the audience gasped. It was subtle, yet undeniable. The refusal, the step back, the carefully crafted distance. And in that single moment, the man who had renounced his birthright, his security, his place in the royal hierarchy for her, looked alone. How does a prince, a soldier, a son of Diana, survive that kind of humiliation? The truth is, it's not just about one event. No, the rejection felt like the culmination of something much deeper. A shift that has been bubbling beneath the surface for months, maybe years. And the timing couldn't be more curious. Meghan, who has fought so fiercely to control her narrative, suddenly finds herself at the center of one she can't quite dictate. Public rejection? Secret flirtation? These aren't just storylines. They're landmines, each threatening to blow apart the fragile empire Harry and Meghan built after leaving the UK. Could this really be the unraveling? Or was it orchestrated all along? Let's rewind for a moment. Public rejection has always been a powerful weapon. Royals, celebrities, even politicians, they all know how much power is contained in a refusal. Remember Princess Diana refusing to hide her pain? Or Wallace Simpson unapologetically standing apart from Edward VIII in those controversial early photos. These gestures weren't accidents. They were messages. And Meghan, ever the actress, knows how to use subtlety to make a statement. Was her rejection of Harry a slip of emotion, or a perfectly rehearsed cue to the world that she was done playing the doting wife? The reaction from the crowd was immediate. Cameras clicked, tongues wagged, headlines spun overnight. Some dismissed it as overanalysis. Others insisted it was proof of a deeper rift. And Harry, poor Harry, stood at the epicenter of this storm, his face betraying emotions he couldn't hide. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was something heavier, something almost like betrayal. Can you imagine giving up your titles, your uniform, your place in history, only to be left standing in the cold by the woman you did it all for? But here's where it gets even darker. That public rejection was just the appetizer. Because behind the scenes, away from the flashing bulbs, Meghan was allegedly drawing attention of another kind. Rumors began to swirl of her playful, almost flirtatious behavior with a new man, someone who wasn't Harry. Someone who, according to whispers, seemed to light up her smile in ways Harry no longer did. It wasn't brazen. It wasn't scandalous in the traditional sense. But it was enough. Enough to raise eyebrows, enough to stir questions, enough to feed the fire. And this is where things take a shocking turn. Because rejection in public is one thing. But pairing that with private flirtation? That's a narrative nobody, not Harry, not Meghan, not the royal family, can easily control. It invites speculation. It fuels gossip. And more importantly, it places Harry in a position he spent his entire life trying to avoid, being humiliated in the eyes of the world. Remember, Harry has always been haunted by the public's gaze. From his childhood grief over Diana to his struggles in the tabloids, he's fought desperately for privacy. And yet, here he was again, thrust into a spectacle he could neither silence nor escape. Now, Let's pause for a second. Think about your own life. Have you ever been rejected publicly? Even in something small, like a joke falling flat in front of friends, or a hand left hanging in midair. It stings. Multiply that by millions of people watching, analyzing, and replaying the moment over and over. That's Harry's reality. The sting of rejection is amplified, immortalized, and weaponized against him. And if Meghan is indeed channeling her energy into someone new, then the pain cuts even deeper. Do you feel the irony here? The man who once rejected the crown for her is now the one being rejected by her, in plain view of the world. But why now? Why this moment? Some say it's stress. Others say it's strategy. Meghan, after all, is no stranger to calculated moves. Could it be that distancing herself from Harry is a way to prepare for her next big reinvention? A Hollywood return? A brand-building empire untethered from the shadow of the monarchy? Or is it something more personal, an actual emotional withdrawal, born out of frustration, boredom, or resentment? The truth, for now, remains hidden. And yet, the signs are there, waiting to be pieced together like a puzzle that reveals a far more explosive picture. What makes this story matter is not just the gossip, but the symbolism. Meghan and Harry were supposed to be the couple that defied tradition, that showed the world love could conquer centuries of duty, protocol, and prejudice. But now, that story is unraveling, live for all to see. Their rejection of the monarchy may have been the first act, but Meghan's rejection of Harry could very well be the tragic finale. And audiences can't look away. It's not just scandal. It's Shakespearean. Love, betrayal, ambition, downfall. It's all here. And so, the stage is set. Harry, the man who gave up a kingdom, now finds himself cast aside by the queen of his heart. Meghan, the actress turned duchess, seems poised for her next act, one that may not include him at all. And lurking in the shadows is a figure the world is desperate to identify. The man she's rumored to be flirting with. Who is he? What does he mean to Meghan? And what does his presence mean for Harry's already fragile world? Because if the public rejection was a warning shot, then the private flirtation is the ticking time bomb. One moment captures the world's attention. The other threatens to destroy the very foundation of their carefully constructed image. And Harry? He's left standing at the crossroads, forced to confront the painful possibility that his greatest sacrifice may have been for nothing. But what Meghan did next in the shadows made the public rejection look tame, and Harry never saw it coming. What Meghan did next in the shadows made the public rejection look tame, and Harry never saw it coming. But let's ask the uncomfortable question. When a woman begins to reject her partner publicly, is it truly spontaneous, or is it the result of months of careful preparation behind closed doors? That's the haunting thought that lingers as we move deeper into this saga. Meghan's rejection of Harry wasn't a slip. It wasn't a mistake. It was, in many ways, the visible tip of an iceberg that had been forming quietly beneath the surface. And Harry? He was the last to realize it. You see, distance rarely appears overnight. It creeps in slowly, like fog swallowing a city skyline. One day, the view is clear. The next, you can barely make out the outlines. Meghan's calculated distance from Harry began long before the cameras captured that one brutal moment. It was in the little things, the avoidance of eye contact, the shift in tone, the refusal to engage in Harry's warmth. And if you think the world missed those signs, think again. Body language experts dissected every frame, highlighting the inches of space that suddenly felt like miles between them. Now here's the irony. For years, Harry has fought tooth and nail to protect Meghan from public scrutiny. He battled tabloids, distanced himself from his family, and even burned bridges with lifelong institutions to shield her from the gaze of the world. Yet now, Meghan herself seemed to weaponize that very gaze. By pulling away, by showing coldness in public, she created a narrative impossible to ignore. Why would she do that? Was it frustration spilling over? Or was it something more chilling? A silent announcement that the love story was already over? Think about it. Public rejection sends a clear signal not just to Harry, but to everyone watching. It says, I'm no longer aligned. I'm no longer invested. I want you to see the cracks. And Meghan, who has always been fiercely aware of optics, knew precisely how much impact one subtle gesture could have. That distance wasn't just physical. It was symbolic. It told the world that the fairy tale had soured. But let's not overlook Harry's role in this dynamic. Every time Meghan stepped back, Harry leaned in. Every time Meghan created space, Harry tried to close it. It was the heartbreaking dance of a man clinging to something already slipping through his fingers. Can you feel that contradiction? The prince who once stood as her defender, now standing helplessly as she defended herself, not against the press, but against him. And then came the whispers. Whispers that Meghan's newfound distance wasn't just about Harry, that perhaps it was about someone else. Another presence. Another man. Suddenly, those public rejections began to look less like random frostiness and more like part of a larger shift in Meghan's emotional world. What if her coldness toward Harry was directly connected to warmth she was directing elsewhere? We need to ask ourselves, why would Meghan start pulling away so visibly at this moment in time? Was it stress from their faltering projects? Was it the pressure of maintaining relevance in Hollywood circles that had already started to move on? Or, and this is where the story takes its sharpest turn, was it because her attention was already being captured by someone new? Someone who gave her something Harry no longer could? That's where the emotional beat lands hardest. Harry wasn't just being rejected in public. He was being sidelined. And Meghan's dismissal of him wasn't just about annoyance. It was about control. By distancing herself, she created space that, according to whispers, she was already filling elsewhere. But let's pause. Have you ever seen someone withdraw from a relationship before the breakup actually happens? It's subtle at first. They laugh a little less. They touch a little less. They begin to prioritize others, new friends, new circles, until one day, you wake up and realize they've already left emotionally, long before they leave physically. That's the haunting reality Harry faced. The woman he had sacrificed his entire royal identity for had already begun to walk away, not with words, but with actions. And here's where it gets even more unsettling. Meghan wasn't just distancing herself quietly. She was doing it on a stage, under lights, in front of millions. It's one thing to withdraw behind closed doors. It's another to reject a partner where the whole world can see. That choice matters. It means Meghan wanted the world to see her independence, to witness her distance. But why? To send a message to Harry? To the royal family? Or to someone else watching? The contradictions pile up. Meghan has always claimed to value privacy, yet her rejection of Harry was anything but private. Harry has always claimed to value loyalty, yet he suddenly found himself standing alone. And the world, ever hungry for a story, began piecing together the puzzle. Could Meghan's coldness toward Harry be directly linked to her hidden flirtation with another man? If that's the case, then the public rejection wasn't the story itself. It was the prologue, the opening act of a drama far darker and far more personal than anyone expected. Because behind the curtain of royal scandal and Hollywood reinvention, Meghan may have already been rehearsing for her next role, one that didn't include Harry at all. And this is where we circle back to the core question. Was Meghan's distance truly about dissatisfaction with Harry, or was it about fascination with someone new? Because if that's true, then the rejection wasn't random. It was deliberate. A warning, a declaration, a signal of where her heart, or at least her ambition, was moving. But just when the whispers were beginning to spread, just when Harry thought the rejection was the most humiliating thing he'd face, another revelation surfaced. Something that made everything far more complicated. Something that shifted the entire narrative from frostiness to outright betrayal. And then came the whispers about another man. And then came the whispers about another man. Whispers that refused to die down. Whispers that slithered into every conversation about Harry and Meghan. Whispers that turned speculation into scandal. But here's the question you have to ask yourself. In a marriage already cracking in public, how much truth does it take to turn rumor into reality? At first, it was easy to dismiss. After all, Meghan had always been surrounded by powerful men, Hollywood producers, agents, friends of friends in the upper echelons of business and entertainment. Networking was her craft. Charisma was her weapon. So when her name was linked to a new male figure, the natural response was, of course. But this time felt different. This time, the timing was too perfect. Right after that public rejection of Harry, Meghan seemed to be channeling her warmth, her attention, her playful energy, somewhere else. And that's when the identity of this mysterious figure became the burning question. Who was he? Was he a Hollywood insider, drawn into Meghan's orbit as she plotted her grand return? Was he a businessman, offering her the kind of stability Harry no longer could? Or was it even more scandalous? Someone within the same social circles Harry thought he could trust? The irony is sharp, isn't it? Harry gave up the world for Meghan, only to watch her possibly build a new one with someone else at its center. Imagine the pain of seeing your partner, the one you defended against your own blood, laughing, glowing, flirting in ways she no longer does with you. Can you imagine that sting? And the cruelest part, it wasn't just behind closed doors. There were sightings. There were whispers at parties. Meghan seen smiling a little too widely, laughing a little too freely, leaning in just a little too close. Let's not pretend this was subtle. Meghan knows how to handle herself under scrutiny. If she wanted to hide, she could. So why let these whispers grow? Why allow the cameras, the insiders, the gossip mills to feast on these rumors? Could it be that she wanted the world to see her independence, and by extension, her availability? Or was it all part of a bigger play, one in which Harry himself was the pawn? But here's where it gets twisted. Harry, once the golden boy who walked away from his crown, now found himself walking in the shadows of speculation. The same tabloids he once despised were now the only ones telling his side of the story. They painted him as the victim, the wounded husband left out in the cold, while Meghan basked in the glow of a new male presence. And isn't that ironic? The very press Harry fought so hard to escape now became his accidental ally in framing Meghan's betrayal. Think about it. If Meghan's coldness toward Harry was the warning shot, then her flirtation with this new figure was the explosion. It confirmed the suspicion that the marriage was not just strained, it was fractured. Every whisper about Meghan and this man chipped away at the fragile facade Harry had worked so desperately to preserve. And with every sighting, every laugh, every innocent moment, the gulf between Harry and Meghan widened. Ask yourself this. Have you ever watched someone you love give their attention to someone else? Even in the smallest way? A laugh, a smile, a shared secret you weren't part of? It gnaws at you. Now amplify that feeling by millions of people watching, discussing, dissecting it. That was Harry's reality. He wasn't just losing his wife's affection in private. He was losing it on the global stage. And here's the cruel twist. Meghan's rumored new man didn't need to do much. He didn't need to be extraordinary, or powerful, or even particularly close to her. His mere presence, the suggestion of him, was enough to ignite headlines, to humiliate Harry, to shift the narrative. That's the power of perception. Meghan didn't need to shout her independence from the rooftops. All she had to do was laugh at the right moment, smile in the right direction, and let the world do the rest. Of course, the question remains. Was this man truly real, or was he a projection of the public's obsession with Meghan's every move? That's the genius of the situation. By never clarifying, by never confirming or denying, Meghan let the rumors flourish unchecked. And while she basked in the speculation, Harry shouldered the humiliation. Silence can be louder than denial, and Meghan's silence spoke volumes. But here's the chilling part. Those closest to the couple began to notice. Friends whispered that Meghan seemed lighter, freer, almost happier when Harry wasn't around. Others hinted that she craved excitement Harry couldn't give her anymore. And those whispers grew until they couldn't be ignored. The world began to ask the same question Harry must have been asking himself in the quiet of night. Is there someone else? Because if there was, it would explain everything. The coldness, the rejection, the calculated distance. It would explain Meghan's confidence, her refusal to hide, her sudden boldness in social settings. It would even explain her silence. Why deny what can fuel the headlines and keep her name at the top of every trending list? But if there truly was another man, then what did that mean for Harry? The man who gave up the palace for love now stood on the brink of losing the very love he sacrificed everything for. That's not just betrayal. That's tragedy. And it's one the public couldn't turn away from. Because deep down, people weren't just watching Meghan. They were watching Harry, waiting to see how far he would fall. And just when the whispers grew loud enough to become a roar, just when the rumors started to solidify into something undeniable, the cameras caught something no one could ignore. Something that took the whispers out of the shadows and dragged them into the blinding light of day. But when the cameras caught them together, the truth was undeniable. The whispers that had haunted Harry's private life for weeks suddenly exploded into a visual reality that no denial, no carefully worded statement, and no palace-style spin could undo. A smile here, a shared glance there. Meghan, radiant in a way that seemed unfamiliar when she was by Harry's side, leaning just a little too close to the man who had become the center of endless speculation. And this is where the story shifts from rumor to revelation. Because once the images surfaced, the narrative could no longer be dismissed as exaggerated gossip. They were side by side at a gathering, their body language electric. It wasn't overt, it wasn't scandalous in the traditional sense, but it was undeniable. The kind of chemistry you can't fake, the kind of energy that can only come from two people locked in a private, unspoken understanding. Now, imagine Harry. The same Harry who once proudly declared Meghan was the love of his life, the woman worth abandoning his royal world for. To see her in that moment, connected with someone else, must have been devastating. And yet, Harry had no choice but to smile, to pretend, to maintain composure while the world dissected his humiliation frame by frame. Have you ever tried to hold your head high while your heart was breaking? Harry didn't just live that. He lived it under a billion watchful eyes. Let's break down the scene. Meghan wasn't just casually present. She was animated. The way she leaned in, her eyes flashing with excitement, her laughter ringing louder than usual, it all stood in sharp contrast to the frosty demeanor she had shown Harry in public. The cruel irony was impossible to ignore. To Harry, she offered distance. To this man, she offered warmth. That's the contradiction that struck observers the hardest. The rejection of her husband was mirrored by the embrace of another. And the cameras didn't miss a thing. The tabloids pounced. Headlines screamed betrayal, flirtation, new beginnings. Commentators debated endlessly. Was this innocent friendliness blown out of proportion, or was it Meghan's subtle way of sending Harry, and the world, a message? But no matter the interpretation, one fact stood clear. Harry was no longer the center of Meghan's orbit. Someone else was pulling her in. Think about the sting of that moment. Harry had spent years battling against narratives he couldn't control. As a boy, he lived through Diana's agony, played out on the world stage. As a man, he had fought the press tooth and nail to protect Meghan from the same fate. Yet here he was, reliving the nightmare, not as a defender, but as the victim. It's cruel, isn't it? The man who once claimed to escape the royal bubble for privacy was now trapped in a far worse spotlight, one cast not by the monarchy, but by his own wife's actions. Here's where the story takes its sharpest twist. Because Meghan didn't just appear at one event with this man. No, once the cameras had caught the first glimpse, more sightings followed. At dinners, at social functions, even in casual settings where Meghan seemed more relaxed than she had in years. Each photo, each angle, each grainy video clip added fuel to the fire. Could this really be coincidence? Or was Meghan flaunting her independence, daring the world to take notice? The timing couldn't have been more damaging. Harry and Meghan's projects, their Netflix deals, their public brand, their supposed unity, were already under scrutiny. Critics claimed their bond was cracking. Supporters begged for reassurance. But instead of offering proof of a strong marriage, Meghan delivered fuel for the gossip mill. And that's the genius, or cruelty, of it all. By simply existing in the same space as this man, Meghan managed to dominate headlines, overshadow Harry, and control the narrative once again. And Harry? What could he do? Confront her publicly? That would only confirm the rumors. Confront her privately? That risked pushing her further away. In the end, he did the only thing he could. He said nothing. Silence. But silence, in this case, wasn't strength. It was weakness. It was confirmation. And the world saw it. Now let me ask you this. Have you ever been in a relationship where your partner seemed to shine brighter with someone else? Where their laughter felt fuller, their smile more genuine, their energy more alive? It's crushing. And yet, Meghan wasn't hiding that brightness. She was showcasing it. It was a declaration, silent but loud, that her energy had shifted. The public drew their own conclusions. Some argued Meghan was simply reclaiming her independence, enjoying freedom Harry couldn't understand. Others argued it was a calculated strategy, aligning herself with powerful new figures to rebuild her Hollywood dominance. But the most explosive interpretation, of course, was that Meghan had already emotionally left Harry behind. That her flirtation was not just playful, but purposeful. And here's the cruel irony. The same Harry who had walked away from his family to protect Meghan now found himself walking away from Meghan emotionally, forced out by her actions. That's not just betrayal. That's Shakespearean tragedy, a man undone not by his enemies, but by the very woman he thought was his greatest ally. But the story doesn't stop there. Because once the cameras caught Meghan and this man together, the palace, the very institution Harry had abandoned, began to stir. And their reaction wasn't sympathetic. It wasn't supportive. It was damning. And just when Harry thought the scandal couldn't escalate further, the palace stepped in. And just when Harry thought the scandal couldn't escalate further, the palace stepped in. That was the moment the whispers became a full-blown crisis, not just for Harry and Meghan, but for the monarchy itself. Because when Buckingham Palace makes a move, it's never accidental. It's deliberate, calculated, and dripping with centuries of strategy. And this time, the move carried a chilling message. The royal family was not going to sit quietly while Meghan humiliated their wayward prince. But here's the question, why now? Why would the palace choose this moment, after years of tolerating Harry and Meghan's independence, to intervene? The answer is simple, optics. The public rejection was bad enough. The flirtation with another man? Catastrophic. Because it wasn't just Meghan embarrassing Harry. It was Meghan embarrassing the monarchy, the very crown Harry still symbolically represented, whether he liked it or not. Picture the scene inside royal walls. King Charles, already under strain from his own health and political challenges, receiving reports of Meghan's behavior splashed across every front page. Prince William, the heir, furious at the fresh humiliation Harry had dragged the family into. Courtiers whispering that the monarchy's reputation was once again being tarnished, not by enemies abroad, but by family. The echoes of Diana, Fergie, Wallis Simpson, all resurfacing in one scandal. History, it seemed, was repeating itself in the cruelest way. And if you think the royals would extend sympathy to Harry, think again. To them, Harry wasn't the victim. He was the liability. By rejecting his role, abandoning the UK, and aligning himself so tightly with Meghan, Harry had tethered the monarchy's reputation to hers. And now, as her image faltered, so too did his, dragging the royal brand along with it. That was unacceptable. So what did the palace do? Not a public statement. No, they're far too seasoned for that. Instead, they launched their most powerful weapon, silence, coupled with carefully orchestrated leaks. Insiders suddenly appeared in the press, speaking of concern for Harry's well-being, hinting at Meghan's restlessness, planting stories that painted the monarchy as the dignified victim of Harry and Meghan's chaos. It was the old strategy at play. Never complain, never explain, but always leak. Now, pause for a moment. Isn't it ironic? The very press Harry despised, the same tabloids he accused of destroying his mother, now became the palace's sword against him. They didn't need to speak. The headlines did it for them. Stories about Meghan's Hollywood ambitions, about lonely Harry, about growing divides between husband and wife flooded the airwaves. The palace hadn't just stepped in. They had declared war. And Meghan knew it. She could feel the icy breath of the monarchy on her neck. But rather than retreat, she did what she always does. She doubled down. Instead of softening her image, she sharpened it. She stepped out bolder, more glamorous, more independent than ever, almost daring the royals to come after her. And Harry? He was stuck in the middle, torn between a wife under fire and a family sharpening their knives. Let's not forget the emotional toll this must have taken on Harry. Imagine being rejected publicly by your wife, humiliated privately by her rumored flirtations, and then watching your own family use the crisis as ammunition against you. Where does a man turn when both his love and his blood seem to be against him? But here's the contradiction that makes this moment so fascinating. Meghan's defiance gave her strength, but it also deepened the palace's fury. Every bold move she made, every smile she flashed beside that rumored man, every independent step she took only confirmed what the royals believed all along, that Meghan was never truly one of them. To the monarchy, she wasn't just Harry's wife. She was the woman dismantling the family's dignity brick by brick. The stakes grew higher with each passing day. For Harry, the danger wasn't just losing Meghan. It was losing the last thread of respect he still had within the royal fold. And whether he admitted it or not, that mattered. Because while Harry had chosen Meghan over the monarchy, deep down, he still craved acceptance. He still wanted his family's approval. And now, thanks to Meghan's actions, that approval seemed further away than ever. But the palace wasn't finished. Behind closed doors, plans were being discussed. Consequences. Strategies. A tightening of the royal circle that excluded Harry more than ever before. And as whispers of these conversations began to leak into the press, one thing became painfully clear. Harry was about to face the full force of a monarchy he thought he had escaped. And just when Harry believed the humiliation couldn't get any worse, Meghan made her boldest move yet, one that turned the scandal into something far more personal and far more dangerous. And just when Harry believed the humiliation couldn't get any worse, Meghan made her boldest move yet, one that turned the scandal into something far more personal and far more dangerous. Because Meghan didn't retreat. She didn't apologize. She didn't even attempt to soften the storm. Instead, she leaned into it, as if daring the world to keep watching. But here's the shocking part. She didn't just lean in with words or statements. She did it with her actions. Actions that made it impossible for anyone, Harry, the palace, the press, to ignore what was happening. Her public rejection of Harry had already been seared into memory. The rumors of another man had already gained traction. But now Meghan began to amplify her independence in ways that left little room for interpretation. She arrived at events without Harry, radiating confidence, exuding the kind of charisma people hadn't seen from her in years. She mingled with powerful figures, charmed rooms that Harry seemed excluded from, and laughed with the very kind of energy she'd once reserved for her husband. And then there was the moment that broke through the noise. Meghan's interaction with the rumored new man. This time, in front of flashing cameras, without hesitation. No careful glances, no subtle cues. She leaned in. She laughed. She touched his arm lightly, as if oblivious to the fact that the world was watching. But was it oblivion or calculation? Because Meghan Markle has never been naive about optics. She knows when she's being photographed. She knows the power of a single image. So when those pictures hit the press, Meghan sparkling beside this man, while Harry stood isolated and stiff, the world didn't see coincidence. They saw a narrative, a declaration, a bold statement that Meghan was no longer afraid of the consequences. Now, think about Harry in that moment. The man who had once been her shield, her protector, the one she clung to when the world seemed hostile, suddenly sidelined, publicly diminished, and replaced in the spotlight by someone else. Can you imagine the sting of seeing your wife glow brighter beside another man than she does with you? Can you imagine the humiliation of knowing those images would circle the globe within hours, dissected by tabloids, debated on talk shows, immortalized online forever? This wasn't just scandal. This was betrayal wrapped in spectacle. And the contradictions piled higher. Meghan still insisted on privacy, yet she staged her independence under the brightest lights. Harry still clung to loyalty, yet loyalty was the very thing eroding beneath his feet. The palace whispered of concern, yet their silence only fueled the flames. And the public? The public couldn't look away. They were watching a modern-day royal drama play out in real time, with Meghan as the bold protagonist and Harry as the tragic figure trailing behind. But here's where the twist cuts deepest. Meghan wasn't just flirting with independence. She was flirting with reinvention. Every appearance without Harry became a symbol of her autonomy. Every interaction with this rumored new man positioned her as a woman stepping into a new chapter. And in Hollywood, the world Meghan craves, perception is everything. The whispers that she had outgrown Harry didn't weaken her brand. They strengthened it. They made her look powerful, untethered, unstoppable. And Harry? He was left with the opposite image. Isolated, rejected, reduced from a prince to a shadow in Meghan's story. That's the cruel irony. The man who once gave her global status now seemed irrelevant in her narrative. But this wasn't just about Harry and Meghan anymore. This was about control of the story. Meghan was seizing it, shaping it, daring the world to question her choices while she doubled down on them. And the palace, furious at her audacity, found themselves outmaneuvered yet again. Because how do you silence someone who thrives in the chaos you want to suppress? Still, even bold moves have consequences. And Meghan's latest display, her laughter, her warmth, her calculated distance from Harry, didn't just humiliate her husband. It sent shockwaves through the royal family, Hollywood, and the public alike. Everyone was asking the same question. How long could Harry endure this humiliation before breaking? Because every man has a breaking point. And for Harry, that moment was approaching faster than anyone expected. But Meghan's response, when Harry finally confronted her, left him more stunned than the public rejection, more wounded than the flirtation, and more lost than ever before. But Meghan's response, when Harry finally confronted her, left him more stunned than the public rejection, more wounded than the flirtation, and more lost than ever before. Imagine it. A quiet moment away from the cameras. Harry, tense, desperate, demanding clarity. The prince who once faced Taliban gunfire in Afghanistan, now trembling at the thought of losing his wife. His voice, breaking. His eyes, searching for a flicker of the Meghan he had sacrificed his entire life for. And Meghan? Calm, cold, almost rehearsed. Harry asked the question everyone else was already asking. Is there someone else? The silence that followed was louder than any answer she could have given. She didn't cry. She didn't deny. She didn't rush to reassure him. Instead, she tilted her head, her expression unreadable, and finally uttered a sentence that sliced him deeper than 1,000 tabloid headlines. Harry, you're imagining things. But here's the contradiction. If it was imagination, why did her eyes sparkle with that unshakable confidence? Why did her body language scream dismissal instead of comfort? Why did Harry, the man who once trusted her against the world, suddenly feel like he was the outsider in his own marriage? This confrontation wasn't explosive. It wasn't a screaming match. It was worse. It was clinical, almost surgical in its cruelty. Meghan didn't lash out. She deflected. She shifted the burden onto Harry, making him question his own instincts, his own judgment, his own worth. That's the kind of manipulation that leaves scars deeper than words. Have you ever felt gaslit by someone you love? It's maddening. And for Harry, it was devastating. Now let's zoom out. Meghan's response wasn't just about denying an affair. It was about power. By brushing off Harry's pain, by refusing to acknowledge the whispers, she kept control of the narrative. She dictated the terms of their conversation. Harry's confrontation wasn't a triumph. It was a defeat. He came in seeking answers. He left with more questions than ever. But here's where the story takes an even darker twist. Meghan didn't stop at dismissal. She leaned into the idea of Harry being insecure, unstable, weak. She allegedly reminded him of his dependence on her, the brand they built together, the projects that tied them, the public image that made them both relevant. Without her, she implied, what did Harry have? A broken bond with his family? A fragile sense of independence? A fading spotlight? And that's the irony. Harry, who once walked away from the palace to protect Meghan, now found himself trapped in a palace of her making. One where he was the prisoner and she was the queen. The power dynamic had flipped entirely. Meghan no longer needed Harry to define her, but Harry still needed Meghan to survive. Think about the emotional weight of that realization. The boy who grew up in Diana's shadow, always yearning for unconditional love, now faced the terrifying possibility that the woman he believed was his anchor might never have been tethered to him at all. Was Meghan truly his partner? Or had she always been a strategist, playing a role until it no longer suited her? The contradictions multiplied. Meghan the victim turned into Meghan the victor. Harry the rescuer became Harry the rejected. The fairy tale became a cautionary tale. And yet, despite the pain, Harry couldn't walk away. He clung to Meghan still, even as she pushed him aside. That's what makes this moment so haunting. Harry's loyalty persisted even when Meghan's did not. But just when it seemed like Harry couldn't fall any further, Meghan revealed something even more shocking. Something not said in anger, but with icy finality. She told him, "You're not the man I thought you'd be." Those words shattered him, not because they were loud, but because they were definitive. They were a rewriting of their entire love story, reducing years of sacrifice into a single cutting judgment. And the cruelest part? Meghan said it with the same composure she might use when discussing a business deal. No emotion, no hesitation, just cold detachment. It was in that moment Harry realized he was no longer her partner. He was her past. And the man she might have been flirting with? He wasn't just a rumor anymore. He was a symbol of Meghan's future, a future that no longer had room for Harry. But Meghan's secret moves went beyond icy words and cold dismissals. What she was building behind Harry's back was far bigger, far more dangerous, and far more calculated than anyone could have imagined. But Meghan's secret moves went beyond icy words and cold dismissals. What she was building behind Harry's back was far bigger, far more dangerous, and far more calculated than anyone could have imagined. Because Meghan wasn't just flirting with independence. She was engineering it. Quietly, carefully, she was putting the pieces in place for a life where Harry was no longer the centerpiece, but the footnote. And she did it the way she always has, through connections, through charm, and through a hidden network of allies who seemed to grow louder as Harry grew quieter. Here's the shocking part. While Harry was busy battling whispers about her rumored flirtation, Meghan was busy expanding her influence. Hollywood dinners, discreet phone calls, meetings under the radar with agents, producers, executives who saw in Meghan not just a duchess, but a brand. A woman unshackled from the constraints of royal protocol, ready to reinvent herself on her own terms. Was Harry even aware of how far she had gone? Or was he too blinded by the fear of losing her to realize she was already halfway gone? And this is where the betrayal cuts deepest. Meghan's secret network wasn't just professional. It was personal. These were the friends who reassured her, the insiders who whispered encouragement, the confidants who told her she deserved more. They didn't tell her to stand by Harry. They told her she could stand alone. Or worse, that she might shine brighter with someone else. Think about that. Imagine your partner building a world parallel to yours, one where you no longer fit. Every phone call, every late-night text, every closed-door meeting feeding into a narrative that excludes you. For Harry, that must have been like watching his marriage crumble in real time, yet being powerless to stop it. And the contradictions. Meghan claimed loyalty while quietly investing in independence. She spoke of unity while weaving a life that didn't require Harry's presence. She smiled beside him for the cameras while plotting a future where he was nowhere to be found. Isn't that the cruelest irony? The public saw a duchess in control, but Harry saw a wife slipping away. The whispers about the other man suddenly made more sense in this light. Because Meghan's growing independence wasn't just professional, it was emotional. The laughter, the glow, the warmth she displayed around him, it wasn't random. It was the byproduct of a woman already leaning into a new network, a new chapter, a new identity. And if Harry thought he could pull her back with loyalty alone, he was tragically mistaken. But let's pause for a moment. Have you ever felt outnumbered in your own relationship? Not just by another person, but by an entire circle of voices encouraging your partner to step away? That's what Harry was facing. He wasn't just losing Meghan to one man. He was losing her to an entire ecosystem of people who believed she could do better. And that's where the story turns brutal. Because Meghan's secret moves weren't simply about distancing from Harry, they were about replacing him. The rumors of flirtation were only the surface. Beneath that was a much bigger game. Meghan wasn't just flirting with another man. She was flirting with a future that erased Harry altogether. For Harry, the realization must have been devastating. Every time he walked into a room, he wasn't just competing with whispers about another man. He was competing with Meghan's entire vision of life without him. And the most painful part? She seemed to thrive in it. Her laughter was louder. Her presence, bolder. Her confidence, untouchable. The Meghan who once clung to Harry for protection no longer needed him. She had found her own army. But even as Meghan built her secret network, even as she flirted with new beginnings, Harry's breaking point was approaching. The humiliation, the rejection, the whispers, all of it pushed him closer to the edge. He could no longer ignore the truth. He could no longer pretend the cracks weren't there. And when that breaking point came, it wouldn't just be private. It would explode into the public eye in ways Meghan couldn't control. And just when Meghan thought she had the upper hand, just when she seemed untouchable, Harry finally snapped. And what he did next changed everything. And just when Meghan thought she had the upper hand, just when she seemed untouchable, Harry finally snapped. And what he did next changed everything. For weeks, maybe months, Harry had been the silent figure. The rejected husband. The man the tabloids pitted, the world mocked, and Meghan seemed to brush aside. But silence has a breaking point. And when it came, Harry's reaction wasn't just emotional, it was volcanic. Picture it. A private event. Meghan glowing, Harry brooding. The tension between them so thick, even those in the room felt the chill. And then, seemingly out of nowhere, Harry's composure cracked. He confronted her in front of witnesses. Not a gentle plea this time. Not a whispered question. But a raw, desperate challenge. Enough. Tell me the truth. The room froze. Meghan, startled but not rattled, did what she always does. She tried to control the optics. Calm voice. Controlled expression. But Harry wasn't playing that game anymore. He pushed. He demanded. And the people who saw it knew in that instant that this wasn't just a marital spat. This was a man on the brink, a prince stripped of dignity, begging for clarity while his wife played to the audience. And the irony? Meghan's response wasn't denial. It wasn't even anger. It was dismissal. A small smile. A shake of the head. The kind of reaction that says, "You don't matter enough for me to argue with." Can you imagine that? To pour out your pain in front of others, only to be treated like a child throwing a tantrum? That's the cruelty Harry faced. But what Meghan underestimated was the impact of this moment. Because witnesses talk. And within hours, the story spread. Whispers of Harry's outburst, Meghan's coldness, the tension that no longer could be hidden. For the first time, it wasn't just the press speculating. It was insiders, friends, staffers, people who had seen it with their own eyes. The private rejection had gone public, and it was uglier than anything before. This was Harry's breaking point, and it showed in his face, his demeanor, his every move in the days that followed. He stopped smiling for the cameras. He stopped playing the supportive husband role. Instead, he looked haunted, worn down, like a man carrying the weight of betrayal he couldn't name aloud. Have you ever seen someone lose hope in real time? That's what Harry looked like, and the world noticed. But here's the cruelest twist. Meghan didn't soften. She didn't reach out to rebuild. She doubled down. While Harry unraveled, she appeared more radiant, more independent, more emboldened. It was as though his weakness fueled her strength, as though every inch he lost was an inch she gained. And that contradiction drove the narrative even further. Harry, the tragic figure, collapsing under the weight of humiliation. Meghan, the powerful figure, thriving under the chaos. The victim and the victor, locked in a drama that felt less like a marriage and more like a performance staged for the world. But let's not underestimate Harry here. A man at his breaking point can become unpredictable, and Harry, wounded and desperate, began to show signs of fighting back, not against Meghan directly, but against the situation, the rumors, the palace, even himself. He started pulling away. He started making moves that hinted at rebellion, but this time, not for Meghan, for himself. And that's where the tragedy deepens. Because when Harry finally snapped, it didn't just fracture his marriage further. It fractured the fragile illusion that had held their entire brand together. The world stopped seeing them as a united front. Instead, they saw a husband and wife tearing each other apart, piece by piece, in front of an audience of millions. And just when it seemed like Harry couldn't fall further, Meghan delivered a public gesture so bold, so shocking, that it made his private outburst look insignificant by comparison. And just when it seemed like Harry couldn't fall further, Meghan delivered a public gesture so bold, so shocking, that it made his private outburst look insignificant by comparison. It happened in plain sight, under the bright lights, with cameras rolling and the world watching. Meghan didn't hide. She didn't whisper. She didn't pull Harry aside to quietly mend the cracks. No, she stepped forward, dazzling in her independence, and acted as though Harry didn't even exist. The moment was small, but devastating. A deliberate refusal to stand beside him. A subtle step away when he tried to move closer. A choice to laugh, to sparkle, to shine in the company of others, while Harry lingered on the margins like an afterthought. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't body language slipping through the cracks. This was Meghan making a statement. I don't need you. And that, more than anything else, was the dagger. Because Harry had built his world around her. He had left behind his titles, his home, his family, his army comrades, his duty, all of it, for Meghan. And in this single, cutting gesture, she reduced him to a prop in her performance. Have you ever felt invisible in the presence of the person you love? Have you ever been made to feel unnecessary, unwanted, irrelevant, not in private, but before an audience? That was Harry's reality. A humiliation amplified by millions of viewers, thousands of headlines, endless social media memes. Harry wasn't just sidelined. He was erased. And Meghan, radiant and unshaken, leaned into it. She didn't flinch. She didn't second-guess. She carried herself with the ease of someone who had already written a new script for her life. A script where Harry was no longer her co-star. The contradictions couldn't be sharper. Meghan had once painted herself as the woman who needed Harry's protection, his love, his loyalty. Now she stood tall, broadcasting to the world that she was her own force, maybe even stronger without him. And Harry, once a prince, once a soldier, once a symbol of resilience, looked reduced to a man left hanging in the shadows of his wife's ambition. But here's where the twist becomes unbearable. Meghan wasn't just shining alone. She was shining in proximity to the rumored new man. The playful laughter, the subtle touches, the way she leaned into his presence while distancing herself from Harry. It was a performance layered with meaning. If her earlier rejection had been subtle, this was blatant. A display that left no room for interpretation. And the world saw it. The press pounced. Headlines screamed of Meghan's bold independence, of Harry's visible isolation, of a marriage crumbling not in whispers, but in spectacle. Commentators argued whether Meghan was liberating herself or betraying the man who had given her everything. But no matter the debate, the humiliation for Harry was undeniable. The palace, already fuming, saw confirmation of everything they had warned Harry about. Meghan, they believed, was proving herself to be a liability beyond repair. And for once, the public seemed to agree. Supporters who had once cheered the couple's independence now questioned Meghan's motives. Was this about love or leverage? Harry's pain was raw, visible, impossible to ignore. His eyes betrayed him even when his lips stayed sealed. And that's when the cruel irony cut deepest. Meghan looked more alive, more free, more magnetic than she had in years, but only when Harry wasn't the one by her side. This was more than rejection. This was erasure. And Harry knew it. Everyone knew it. The fairy tale wasn't just cracked. It was shattered. And Meghan, whether intentionally or not, was showing the world that she was already moving on. But the humiliation didn't end there. Because Meghan's next move, her grand statement of independence, wouldn't just wound Harry privately. It would redefine her publicly and signal to the world that she was no longer bound by the man who gave up everything for her. But the humiliation didn't end there. Because Meghan's next move, her grand statement of independence, wouldn't just wound Harry privately. It would redefine her publicly and signal to the world that she was no longer bound by the man who gave up everything for her. She stepped out on her own. No Harry in sight. No subtle gestures of solidarity with her husband. Meghan appeared radiant, polished, commanding the cameras in a way that seemed rehearsed, deliberate, as if she'd been waiting for this very moment. Every detail was curated. The flawless outfit, the confident smile, the entourage that followed her like she was Hollywood royalty. This wasn't Meghan the Duchess. This was Meghan the star, reclaiming the spotlight for herself. And the media lapped it up. Headlines shifted overnight. Meghan Markle shines solo. Duchess no more. Meghan carves out her own path. The coverage wasn't about her as Harry's wife. It was about her as an individual, a woman standing apart. But look closely, and you'll see the subtle cruelty in that framing. Because every word that praised Meghan's independence was a reminder of Harry's irrelevance. Think about it. Meghan, once portrayed as dependent on Harry's protection against the monarchy, now thrived without him. And Harry, once the bold rebel who gave up everything for love, was now reduced to a silent, sidelined figure. Have you ever watched someone you love be celebrated for their freedom, knowing that freedom means breaking away from you? That's the agony Harry lived with. But Meghan wasn't just basking in attention. She was sending a message. Her every move screamed autonomy. She mingled effortlessly with Hollywood elites, charmed new business partners, and positioned herself as a power player in her own right. The whispers of her flirtation with another man didn't die down. If anything, they gained traction. Because now, the public saw her as a woman who didn't need Harry and perhaps didn't want him. And here's the irony. While Meghan thrived, Harry looked diminished. Photos of him alone, shoulders slumped, expression haunted, circulated widely. He appeared lost, disconnected, like a man watching his world slip through his fingers. Every image of Meghan's independence amplified Harry's dependence. And the contrast was brutal. But Meghan's grand statement wasn't just about optics. It was about control. By stepping out alone, she seized the narrative. She showed the world that she could stand without Harry, that she was not just half of Harry and Meghan, but Meghan in her own right. It was bold. It was defiant. And it was devastating. Because in asserting herself, she erased the partnership that had once been their foundation. Now let's pause. Why would Meghan make such a move at this moment? Was it calculated revenge against Harry for his outburst? Was it a preemptive strike to prepare for a potential separation? Or was it simply Meghan being Meghan, ambitious, unapologetic, unwilling to let anyone, even Harry, dim her shine? The contradictions were impossible to ignore. Meghan spoke of love, yet displayed distance. She spoke of partnership, yet performed independence. She claimed to value privacy, yet staged her autonomy under the brightest lights. And Harry, caught in the middle, couldn't fight back without confirming what the world already suspected, that his marriage was unraveling. And just when Meghan's solo appearance had the world buzzing, she did something even bolder. She returned to the public eye again. This time, in the company of the very man at the center of all the whispers. No more subtlety, no more careful glances. Meghan stepped out, radiant and unapologetic, as if daring Harry, the palace, and the world itself to challenge her. Her next appearance sealed the narrative. This wasn't just another outing. It wasn't Meghan casually attending an event. It was a carefully staged performance, a masterstroke in optics. Meghan, glowing with confidence, arrived in the company of the very man the whispers had been circling. Not tucked away in shadows, not caught in a grainy photograph. No, this time, it was undeniable. Public. Bold. Imagine the scene. Meghan stepping out of a sleek car, dressed to kill, her smile dazzling, her aura electric. And there he was, the man at her side. Not holding hands, not overtly romantic. That would have been too easy. No, Meghan knew the power of subtlety. Instead, their closeness spoke louder than any physical touch. The way she leaned toward him, the way he matched her stride, the way their laughter overlapped in a rhythm that felt too natural, too intimate, to dismiss. And where was Harry? Nowhere. Absent. Silent. Erased from the picture entirely. That's the moment the headlines exploded. Meghan moves on. Harry left behind. The new man in Meghan's life. It didn't matter whether Meghan and this man were truly involved. The optics told the story. And the story was this. Meghan no longer belonged to Harry. She belonged to herself, and perhaps to someone else. Have you ever felt the ground shift beneath your feet? Have you ever realized, in an instant, that the story you thought you were living was no longer true? That's what Harry must have felt. Because Meghan's appearance wasn't just a statement to the world. It was a message to him. I don't need you anymore. The contradictions burned. Meghan, who once claimed to flee the royal family for love, now seemed to flee from Harry himself. Harry, who once vowed to protect her, now needed protection from the humiliation she caused him. The man who had given her everything, his titles, his family, his country, was now the man she left standing in the shadows. But here's where the twist stings deepest. Meghan's appearance with the rumored man didn't damage her brand. It elevated it. Hollywood buzzed. She was talked about again, not as Harry's wife, but as Meghan Markle, independent, unapologetic, magnetic. The very scandal that humiliated Harry became Meghan's stepping stone back into relevance. And Harry? He was left to pick up the pieces. Alone. Stripped of the fairy tale he thought he had built. Forced to watch as his wife thrived without him. Can you imagine the torment of seeing the person you love shine brighter in your absence than in your presence? It's the kind of cruelty that doesn't just wound, it destroys. The palace, predictably, remained silent. But insiders leaked their fury. Meghan's appearance was seen as confirmation of everything the royals had warned Harry about. To them, she wasn't just embarrassing him. She was embarrassing the monarchy. And for Harry, that meant one thing. He was running out of allies fast. But Meghan wasn't done. Her solo reinvention, her bold step into independence, her flirtation with the new man, it was all building towards something bigger. Because Meghan's true plan wasn't just about humiliating Harry. It was about securing her future. A future where Harry might not even have a place. And that's when speculation turned toward the most dangerous question of all. Was Meghan preparing for separation? Was this her way of easing